Good afternoon and welcome to Smart Trucking's first ever podcast.
This is a new format that we're trying out today, our first podcast. Hope you guys like it. Here by popular demand.
What we're going to be talking about in today's podcast is the best ways to position yourself in trucking for 2020. So to best understand how we need to position ourselves for 2020, what the best moves are going to be is we have to look at what was trending in 2019, what was going to happen, what was happening already, that type of thing, so we know where the industry's headed. Probably the biggest thing that was established at the end of 2019 was that ELD'S are now mandatory, and that's for everybody that's running over the 100-mile radius circle. And that's a huge thing because that clock dictates basically how long and hard we can work every day. And it's not like the old days where if you were an owner-operator, you could just run until you'd made enough money. These clocks now will restrict us, so we have to be making smart money. ELD'S is going to be a huge factor in this industry in 2020, so keep that in mind, and we're going to get back to that point. Something else is trending is the driver shortage, or the supposed driver shortage, keeps trending. So that's a trend that's carrying into 2020. The numbers are going to increase for what the ATA calls their driver shortage. It's interesting to note, of course, that it's in the truckload sector, and it bears specifically on ATA member companies. It's not necessarily true across the board. In fact, it's a bit of a hoax, but it's still going to be a factor in 2020. Something else that's a factor in 2020 is CARB in California is going to continue with its forward process of these mandates heading towards 2024 when they want a zero emissions thing. So that's going to have a bearing on how 2020 curves. Autonomous trucks, I don't really see it having any particular bearing in the near future. So that's off the board. So you don't have to worry about that for a while. But things are going to continue to be more and more important in 2020 are job security and the quality of life for drivers as well. So with all that in mind, drivers have really 4 different starting spots that they're focusing on. Either they're a company driver, a lease operator, an owner operator, a true owner operator, or an independent. So we're going to break those down, look at those 4 individually one at a time, and then decide what's the safest bet for 2020. So company drivers first. There are figures all over the board as to what company drivers make. So what I did was take an average out of all the different sites that I could find, pooled them all in, mixed them all up, broke it all down, and came up with a number that I think is a pretty fair average, a pretty honest average of what the average company driver makes for money. And the average that I came up with was $44,500 a year. Now, bear in mind that you've got a whole lot of guys at the bottom of the spectrum, a whole lot of guys working for mega carriers that are making low wages, running truckload freight. There's a lot of those guys, and that pulls the average down. Some of those guys are down around $32,000 a year. On the other side, the high side, and you've got fewer guys here, fewer than the lower paid guys, and that's what drags the average down. Is you've got guys making 80, 90, over $100,000 a year in private fleets, niche carriers, specialty carriers, that type of thing. And some of those guys are dragging down pretty serious money. But when you pool it all in together and average it out, it comes to most of the guys average over a year is about $44,500. Now, still, the wages have got to go up. It's not enough, but I think it's going to trend in the right direction. We're going to hope it trends in the right direction. But I think the secret is to get those guys out of the bottom pile, the $32,000 guys a year, because those guys are starving to death, literally. They just haven't figured it out yet, or they're too new to be able to do anything about it. But the lesson 1 here for 2020 is going to be not to haul truckload freight for mega carriers, because those guys are at the bottom of the pay scale. And it's just the mega carriers. And it's interesting to notice, interesting to notice too, that LTL company drivers make far and above more money than the truckload guys, and especially with the smaller carriers or the unionized carriers. So for company guys, this is where you want to focus your efforts. If you're doing truckload for the ATA boys, you want to move out of that direction because you want to make better money. You want better quality of life. You want more home time. You want a pension, and you want to be able to build a retirement fund. So there's where the company drivers are for 2020. They're struggling through. Their wages need to go up. I think they will go up. But guys actively have to be playing the board, searching for better jobs. And they're out there. And the more guys that walk away from the $32,000 jobs, the greater the driver shortage is going to be, the more the pressure is going to be on these ATA carriers to raise their rates, because they're not going to have anybody to do it. Someone's going to do it. They're still going to need it to be done. And if no one's doing it for $32,000 a year, they'll try 35, they'll try 36, they'll try 38. They'll just keep trying. And eventually, when they hit the right number, guys will start coming back to them. But you've got to remember, too, that mega carriers aren't in this to pay their people well. Mega carriers have literally starved themselves out by driving the rates lower and lower and lower as they bid. That's how they get the contracts. They come in cheaper than the other guys. CR England comes in cheaper than Prime or something like that. That's how they get it. It's just cheaper freight. And then there's not enough money left over to pay their shareholders, themselves, and then their company guys. The company guys are at the bottom of the list. So you've got to stay away from carriers like this while they fight it out. They're in a battle to the bottom. So, and then you start to see big carriers like CELADON start to disappear because they simply can't survive anymore. They're poorly managed. And we'll talk about CELADON here in a little while because that's a great example. But company drivers, probably the best job security, but they need to see their wages improved. So that's where the company drivers are going to stand.
Something else we're seeing actually quite a trend toward, actually baby steps toward, are jobs that are salary paid for company drivers or hourly wages. Maybe you have a few things to say about hourly paid company driving jobs.
Yes, the trucking industry is recognizing that they need to pay their people better. And there have been, for the mileage rate guys, they threw in 2018, they felt they had a good year, and they threw in a couple cents a mile, most of them, and things went up a little. It improved a little, but not nearly enough. The company guys that were making the money were the guys on salary, but particularly guys paid by the hour. And more carriers are recognizing this because it's such a crapshoot when you don't know how long you'll be stuck at the dock, 2 hours or 5 hours or whatever. So the only really fair way to pay a guy is by the hour. The private fleets have already recognized this. They recognized this years ago. They don't want turnover. They want to get good guys and they want to keep good guys. And those guys pay by the hour. Smaller fleets have recognized this now. They're moving in that direction, or they're trying to come up with some sort of a salary formula, which is all right as long as they don't work you to death. And under the ELD'S system, they shouldn't be able to do that anymore now. So even salary positions are starting to come into play in the industry, and that's a good thing to see. The next group I want to talk about, and this is an important group. We've got to pay attention here. This is a big thing, are lease operators. Now first, let me define the difference between a lease operator and an owner operator, so everybody knows what we're talking about. We're all on the same page. A lease operator is a guy that has leased a truck from the carrier that he's working for, and his financial arrangement is with that carrier. An owner operator is a guy that has made his financial arrangements for the truck with the bank, or he's paid it off. He owns the truck. A lease operator doesn't own the truck. The company owns the truck until the lease is paid out, if it ever is, in fact, at all. We used to call this a never plan. But lease operators are not owner operators. Lease operators are simply working for the company and paying for the truck. Now, carriers love this because the profit margins, as I spoke about earlier, are razor thin. So they don't want to, in any scenario, lose money on a load. And the best way to do that is make sure they're not responsible for any of the transportation costs. What they do is they pass it on to these lease operators, these new guys that just don't understand the deal. So all of their loss is absorbed by these lease operators, and the company just makes pure profit. And all sorts of carriers will, oh man, they'll make more money off their lease operators and their lease operation than they will hauling freight. They can afford to bid the freight right down. They don't own the truck, or well, they do own the truck, but the lease operator's paying for all of it, and they'll bill them the shop costs, the fuel, the insurance, the plates, you name it. The company never loses. So in a time when the market is so bad, when the profit margins are so razor thin, companies are flocking towards this lease operator idea. And the loser is the guy that signs the lease. The carrier doesn't ever lose. Like, it's the carrier that's bid on the freight, but he's going to take the hit out of you if something goes wrong. So lease operators is not going to be the place to be, although carriers will try to push you that direction. It never has been the place to be. But now you get states like California that are standing up against calling a lease operator an operator or an independent or whatever, an owner operator. California recognizes, and there are 12 other states going this direction right now, that say, hey, this guy's truly an employee. He's not an owner operator or lease operator or anything of the sort, because he takes all his orders from the dispatch at one carrier. He works for one carrier. They tell him what to do, when to do, where to do. They tell him the whole thing. He's no different than a company driver. And California's saying, well, this guy isn't a lease operator. He's a glorified company guy. They're classifying him as such, and other states are following suit. So you get the thing now where Swift and everybody is ordering their lease operators out of California because they don't want the legal hassle with California. They know they'll lose. They don't want to spend the money. So you do not want to be a lease operator in 2020. It's as simple as that. It's never been a good idea, frankly. It's never been a good idea.
One thing we're getting some feedback from some drivers, they're often saying that when they're coming out of CDL school and into a company, for example, even in some of the mega carriers, that they're told that, well, there is no truck available for them, but they would have a lease operator program available for them. So they could hop right into a job right away if they cared to be a lease operator, but certainly not as a company driver, that they would have to wait for a job or a position to open for 3 to 4 months. So this is another trick that we're hearing about from some drivers. Do check in the description box below for the video. We have a couple of YouTube videos for those of you who might have more interest in the lease operator programs and why we personally don't care for these lease operator programs.
The next group that we need to talk about are the true owner-operators. But these days, owner-operators are still leased to big carriers and still take their orders from big carriers. And the way California is moving with their AB5 law now, it's going to be tough for the owner-operator, if he's running into that state, to distinguish himself from a company driver. And even big carriers now with owner-operators are worried about this AB5, and they're tending to keep their guys out of California. And it's tough enough to be in a small business, owning your own truck, to make enough money as it is without having to battle the legal aspects of the trucking industry. You count on the carrier to protect you legally. So it's a tough position to be in. You don't want to be in that mess particularly. So, if you're on a run that doesn't include California right now, and you're still making pretty good money, and you're with an honest carrier. And there's another secret to surviving as an owner-operator. So many of these carriers are backwards and crooked. You've got to be on with a good carrier, and they are out there. You just want to make sure you're leased to one of them. And now don't get confused because I said leased. Your operating authority is coming from the carrier. You own the truck, but the operating authority is coming from the carrier, and that way you're leased. And you're taking your orders from them, probably pulling their trailer, maybe not pulling yours, but you're still bound to a bigger carrier. So if you're bound to a bigger carrier, you want to make sure you're with an honest one. These days, the way it's trending to, and look at 2024 coming up when they want zero emissions, and California and everybody else is going to go that way. At the end of the day, do you really want to invest in another truck when this one that you have wears out. Now they've gotten rid of the glider kits and all of that stuff. So for 2020, you've got to be able as an owner operator to look at the equipment you're running now, look at the maintenance records, decide if it's been a maintenance nightmare and if it's costing you too much money to operate, or if you're doing okay, it gets decent fuel mileage. You've got to look at that and decide whether you're going to continue in 2020 because the margins are thin, and whether you're going to bank for another new piece of equipment after 2024 that has zero emissions. And you know there's going to be problems with those things because there have been problems all the way along as they've introduced these different levels of emission standards. So, you know, is that a gamble that you're prepared to take? And some guys have really good deals with carriers, and some owner operators make good money, they're well treated, and it's not a bad run. And all sorts of other guys aren't treated very well, and they're just being used like company trucks, and they're just being, you know, abused. Sit here for free, sit there for free, because they're not getting paid, you know, by the hour while they're sitting. It's just a good luck to you. You're a mileage truck. So, and that trend's going to continue too as carriers start to clamp down and try to save more and more money because the margins are thin. So, think long and hard about whether you're going to continue owning this truck. It's going to continue to cost you more money to maintain in the future, the older it gets, and at some point, sooner or later, you're going to either have to replace it or decide to fold your tent and go for a company driver or retire or something like that. Because owner-operators, you know, very few of them last until retirement age in this day and age, just because the industry is going down. So you've got to decide what you're going to do here and whether 2020 is going to be worth it for you or not. Have a look at the carrier. You may decide now it's a good time to switch over to company guy or retire or go drive a bulldozer or something like that, because things are trending for owner operators for 2020 and they're all trending downhill.
However, there are companies out there where we hear from a lot of owner operators that they're actually doing very well and they've got a good thing going on.
Yeah, if you're in a niche market, for instance, or something specialized, and you're tied in with a good carrier, chances are you're going to be okay. There are outfits like that and guys out there that are still doing well as owner operators. So you've got to assess your own situation. Have a look at the numbers, run the work, look at your past year, see how the numbers ran out for that. Talk to the carrier and see if he thinks he's going to continue to be busy into 2020. And remember now, it used to be an owner operator could run as hard as he wanted, basically, to make enough money to pay all his bills. And with these ELD'S mandated now, owner-operators will not be able to do that any longer. The last group in the trucking industry left today that we haven't talked about are independents, true independents. Guys that own their own truck, they own their own trailer, they have their own operating authority, they have their own insurance, they own their own plates, the whole 9 yards. They're basically like a little trucking company. Often these guys are just one-man guys with a tractor and a reefer and their own authority running coast to coast. And this has been a group traditionally that has worked the hardest, but they've made the best money because there are no middlemen in the formula here. The money goes directly from the customer to the truck owner. So the truck owner has his own customers. There's no one picking out of his pocket. And these are the guys that have made the best money, but they've worked 24/7 to keep their customers happy because they want to keep their customers. They can't afford to lose their customers. So independence for 2020, if you're out there and you're still surviving, if you've got a good deal, if you know your customers, if they love you and you're working 24/7 for them, and you must be all ready to have kept them, because when you're an independent with your own customers, and I know this from my own experience, there's always load brokers picking away at you. There's always big trucking companies picking away at you.
Undercutting your rates.
Underbidding you, undercutting your rates to try to steal that freight away from you. So, you know, it's been a tough go. It's been a good go. Have a look at your position for 2020. The rules are changing. Even independents are bound by this ELD situation now. It's not going to be like when we ran produce off the coast. We would put in 900-mile days. You can't do that anymore with these ELDs. So you've got to reassess your position, talk to your customers, see if you can get them on board with the changes that you're going to have to make to keep your freight. Maybe give yourself a little more lead time when you go to deliver a load or something like that. When it took you 3 days before, ask them for 3.5 or something like that, just to keep your cushion there. But it's going to be a tough year for everybody. Independents are no exception. Now, I mentioned earlier in the podcast about CELADON, and there was a big carrier that's gone down, one of the mega carriers. Now let's look at how that dive by CELADON, how that bankruptcy filing affected the different groups here. Company drivers at CELADON, they're out of a job. There's a big demand for company drivers these days. Those guys will be working by the end of the week, and they'll hardly skip a beat paycheck-wise. They may be out a little money, but it's not like they just can't pick up and keep on going. They've lost the least amount of money for the 4 groups, and they can get a job tomorrow. So they haven't been hurt too badly. CELADON's guys, company guys, haven't been hurt too badly. They'll continue to make money. They'll take a bit of a hit, but they'll keep moving on. CELADON's lease operators now are done. They've lost their money. They've lost the truck. They've lost the equity in the truck. They've lost it all. And this will be enough probably to bankrupt most lease operators for a gamble they took to try to own a truck, and they've lost. And this happens to all sorts of guys. Lease operators in this scenario with CELADON have lost everything. So whether they can even make their next mortgage payment or not is in question. Let's hope their wife has a good job. Owner-operators with CELADON, still devastated. But, not out and down like the lease operator, because they own the truck still. So they can find another carrier to work for in the interim until they find a carrier that they want to stay with. So they'll have to job hop, and that's a pain in the butt. And we used to figure for an owner-operator that every time he switched carriers, he would lose about 10 grand in the interim because of the downtime and everything else, and the relicensing and plating and all of that stuff. You'd suffer about 10 grand in income. So you don't want to do that too often at all. So owner-operators with CELADON were hurt, badly hurt, and they'll have lost whatever CELADON owed them, but they won't be completely down and out like the lease operator is. At least they'll still have the truck and they can go find somewhere else to work. And of course, the independents weren't affected at all by CELADON going down because they were doing their own thing. So they had good job security in that. Company drivers did fairly well. It's the lease operators and the owner operators, and those are guys with big bills, and they got hit the worst. They suffered the most in that deal. And that trend too may continue in 2020 as all these big carriers keep underbidding each other. It's a race to the bottom, and other carriers are going to go down. They'll start to fall. So you've got to make sure that you're not with one of those carriers. And it's hard to tell. It's hard to know. But at least if you're a company guy, you're not going to be completely down and out of the picture. You won't lose your house or something like that. So it's good positioning for 2020 to be a company driver in my eyes. The industry is so volatile these days. At the end of the day, when you look at the trucking industry for 2020, it's on a bit of a downhill slide. It's a gradual slide, but it's sliding down. So what's important to you here? What should be important to you? What should be important to you are things like your financial stability, your job security, and your quality of life. Now, the ELD'S, believe it or not, are going to help you with your quality of life, because you can't be living in the truck working all the time. And the money isn't there anyway, so hopefully you're trending towards getting an hourly job with a pension and something that pays overtime, has a benefit package. That's the way you should be moving, because there's better job security in a situation like that too. So hopefully that's the way you're looking for 2020. You don't want to be caught in the downhill slide. You don't want to be caught in this mega carrier race to the bottom as the rates get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. You don't want to be caught for sure in this lease operator situation. And those are the guys that are going to suffer the most. And there's going to be lots of them because carriers are pushing to get guys into lease operator programs because it saves them money. And that's the bottom line. They make money off that deal. And it's going to be money that you won't make because they're making it. So bear that in mind. And it's all quality of life too. You don't want to be out on the road. It's all right when you're 25. But when you're 55, to be away from home weeks at a time, if your marriage has survived that, if your kids even recognize you when you get home, you've got to bear that in mind. That's a mistake I made. I should come off the road sooner. So don't make the mistake I did. Concentrate more on your quality of life and your home time for 2020. Trucking is going to have to catch up. We're always going to need trucks and truck drivers. There's always going to be freight to be moved. What you want to do is put yourself in a position where you're getting well paid to do that. And a lot of that stuff now is short haul. It's local delivery stuff that can't go on trains or something like that. Just shunting even between rail yards and delivering stuff pays better money than it does bringing the load from the coast anymore. You get more to shunt it from the rail yard to the factory. But keep that in mind. That's the way trucking's going. The long haul stuff is pretty much dead. The over the road stuff is dying quickly, and there's no money left in it anymore. They cry for drivers, but they're not paying anymore. So that's not the way you want to lean. You want to lean towards the local stuff, the sure thing stuff. Get with a good company fleet or something like that, a private fleet that's going to take care of you and let you have your weekends off and sit around your swimming pool in your backyard rather than sitting in the back of a pilot truck stop 900 miles from home. As bad a business people as some owner-operators were, the rates were high enough that in spite of themselves, they were able to make money and survive. That's no longer the case these days. The rates are razor thin, and just because you're a good truck driver doesn't mean you're going to be a good businessman, and doesn't mean that you're going to survive as an owner-operator. And frankly, these days, the way things are, why would you take a chance? Why would you invest your money? Why would you take out a loan for years and years and years and spend a couple $100,000 on something that wasn't going to be a sure thing anymore? And owner-operators, and lease operators either, are not, by any stretch of the imagination, a sure thing anymore. So you've got to do the smart thing money-wise. And the smart thing money-wise is not to invest in the trucking industry. Take your money, invest in yourself, invest in your home, invest in your family, or buy stock, something like that. But you do not want to be a new guy getting out and investing in a truck in 2020 or the years to come. So to wrap up here, at the end of the day, my belief is for 2020, the best way to position yourself is to find yourself a good carrier and be a company driver for that carrier. Lease operator for 2020, run the other way. I've always said that. Don't even think about it. Don't even entertain it. Don't waste your time. Don't spend any money on that. Owner operators for 2020, have a really good look at your position here. Be careful what you do. Think for the future and decide how much of your money you're going to risk and keep in the bank and how much you're going to invest in trucking. But have a good solid look at it and maybe think about this being the time either to transition to a company guy or to maybe retire out or find something else to do or whatever, because 2020 and the years beyond do not look particularly good. Independence, my hat's off to you. I hope it continues to work for you. Have a good solid look at your customers, spend some face time with them, see if they're on the same page so you can keep them and carry on. That's my take on it anyway. Keep the rubber side down. You guys all take care and stay safe. We'll see you on the back haul.